Hello. The pace is punishing. Paul Martin needs a drink. He's straight back on. But it's a great opportunity to hear from two international experts on the subject of intellectual property rights and their significance for the financing in the creative industries. So without wasting any time on introductions, they've been introduced already. I'm going to ask Sophio to say a few words, working pretty much from the legal framework about how IPR is organized internationally.
So thank you very much. Hello, everyone. It's my pleasure and privilege to participate in Impact 2017 in this very beautiful city of Krakow. So when speaking about the cultural and creative industries, we should bear in mind that they are major drivers in the economies of developed as well as developing countries. So, and the CCIs influence the income generation, the job creation, and export earnings. And the recent studies have shown that the figures, the income, the input of the CCIs in the GDPs of the countries is very high. And the recent studies, which was done by the CSAC, showed that 2,250 billion US dollar of the global CCI revenue, which forms the 3% of the world's GDP, and this exceeds also the telecom services revenues also worldwide, and also CCIs created approximately 30 million jobs worldwide. So these are very important figures, and in order to achieve these figures, it is very necessary to have the strong legal framework within the country, also to have the strong and proper enforcement mechanism for that, and also to have very active customers and the right holders, because the legal framework is developed for the users, and if the users are not active on the market and they are not going and requesting the infringement of their rights, the whole system will not work. And when you have on one side the proper legal mechanisms, the proper enforcement mechanisms, and developed copyright system is the outcome of that, and it brings to higher contribution to the economy of the world. And one of the best examples for that is the United States. As the world's first economy with almost 20 trillion US dollar GDP, the contribution of copyright industries in the global economy and in GDP of US is almost 11%, which forms 2 trillion US dollars. And this is also the figures which show us that copyright and creative industries is very well and very advanced, developed in the United States. And you have, of course, in the United States, the Hollywood on the one side, the writers like George Martin and the other ones. You have the Silicon Valley there, and it forms the whole infrastructure, which is very well developed. And so as the representative of the small country, it is very important for us also to have the proper legal framework, also to have the enforcement mechanisms, and also the active users. Because, for example, in my country, the users sometimes they avoid to file the lawsuits against the infringers, as they think, you know, that he was my relative or some neighbor, and I cannot sue against him. So, and we should have also the legal thinking, the proper legal thinking, that this is for the well-being of our society and for the development of the system as such. One of the best examples also for that is George Martin. Yeah, we all know the song of Eyes of Fire, and he receives annually the earnings, it depends, in some years 12 or 15 million US dollars from his books and TV shows. The books of Game of Thrones were sold more than 60 million copies worldwide. It was translated into 40 47 languages all over the world, and the Game of Thrones TV series generates slightly more than $1 billion per year. And it is also not only good for the economy of the United States, but also for the other countries, as this is very important that the books translated, the translators have their copyrights also, and also the indirect income from these books. It is also very important. You have also the T-shirts, the TV, the toys, and the other industries who use these figures. And also in creative industries, you have not only the copyright, but also the trademarks and the designs which are involved there, and which the users also license and have the income from that also. So for the proper system, and for having the proper system, it is very important to have the proper legal framework and the developed infrastructure as such and as a whole. And we think that the copyright and the creative industries field is the field where you can earn lots of money. And so the government from the one side should have ensure the proper remuneration for the creators, who will have the more impact to write the new things and to create the new things. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Martin, in your presentation, you spoke about how you wanted to punch the bragging Brit in the face in Venice. He was telling his girlfriend about how many movies he was stealing. Tell us about it.
I did. I shouldn't have said that, should I? I'm going to get into big trouble.
Compelling image, though.
Perhaps I can correct the record and say that I resisted the opportunity to give the young man a firm telling off.
Okay.
Okay. But I think,
British.
Simon, if I may, it might be helpful to illustrate the importance of intellectual property to the commercial activities of creative businesses, because this is something also I touched on. I don't know whether, is there a second presentation of mine? Anyway, never mind. One of the problems that we have in the creative economy, creative industries sector, is what is called the problem of scale, the problem of business scale. And let me illustrate that by reference to the United Kingdom. There are about 200,000 creative businesses in the United Kingdom, of which 90%, some 90%, employ one person only. So we are talking about an economy which is overwhelmingly micro business. And why is that the case? Well, some people prefer to stay very small because a lot of creative enterprises work very well when they're small. But other people would like to grow but can't. And they can't because they never are able to hold on to the intellectual property that they create. This is a huge problem in our independent film sector. But let me illustrate this with greater precision, if I may, because this also raises another issue, which is the issue of economic regulation. Let us contrast the condition of the UK independent television business with the UK independent film business, two quite different subsectors. The UK independent television business is a global success story. We export to all parts of the world, including the United States. It's generally acknowledged to be a huge success. Why? Because over the last 25 years, different measures of economic regulation have obliged the broadcasters to buy products from independent TV production companies through quotas and other means. So over the last 20, 25 years, the independent television sector, through these commissions, have been able to make programs and hold on to the IP which they create. And through that, they can then build their businesses little by little, 2 people, 4 people, 6 people, 8 people. They become sustainable creative businesses. So that's the success story. You contrast that with the independent film, TV production business, where there have been many kinds of intervention, but nothing like the intervention in the television sector. What you have there is a tiny production sector which is trapped in serial product financing. It makes a film. It makes another film. It makes another film. It never builds a film business to compete with the Americans or anybody else, because they always have to sell their rights to a distributor in order to get paid for their work. And so they just go round and round and round and never get any bigger. And this is actually now a crisis in the UK. There was a report published by a trade association only 2 or 3 weeks ago which said that the independent film sector, the indie sector, is in real difficulty because of a lack of financing. So here you have the story of 2 different industries, both of which are in the audiovisual space, one a success, the other finding it very hard, and the key to the difference is intellectual property and being able to hold on to it or not.
Very interesting. Sophia, you spoke about the need across the world to have a system, a process, a regime is the word I'm looking for protecting the intellectual property. And to the man on the Vaporetto in Venice, who happily steals it all, do you have any insight into how we can better protect intellectual property for the people who make it?
Yeah, for the better protection, for example, in Georgia, we have some challenges nowadays concerning the internet service providers' liability. So the legislation is not in place now, and we are developing it. For the better protection, from the one side, we should have the proper legislation, of course. Also, the agencies who are dealing with that should enforce it very properly. And the public awareness should be in place also. The people should know how they should enforce their right and what is needed for that, how they should go and address, whom they should address, for example, where their rights are infringed. And in countries like Georgia, this is a real challenge, and we as a National Intellectual Property Center are having the different public awareness activities, the meeting with the different stakeholders, like the photographers, the film producers, the publishers associations, the singers, and the other stakeholders of copyright, in order to let them know what are their rights, how should they protect it, and what are the legal mechanisms. Because sometimes, you know, the problem is also in this field that it is intellectual property is the private property. And sometimes the people do not realize it, and they think that the state should take care about this. And when, for example, from Georgian films, for example, it is shown, or some Georgian music in other countries, like like infringing, for example, in Armenia, someone is dancing the Georgian dances, and they think that, you know, the state should take care about it, and they do not realize that it is the private property, it is the copyright, and the person, the author, should take care about it, and they should be aware how to enforce their rights. And this is also the problem, I think, which should be improved, for in small countries like we, and I think all over the world it could be challenging.
I agree with that completely. And the position taken by governments, by the way, is crucially important. The signals that they give is crucially important. If you want to look at a country where the situation is now really bad, and it's a modern country and it's an EU country, have a look at Spain. Virtually every major distributor has withdrawn from Spain because they simply don't get The regime is not interested in enforcing the intellectual property regime. But of course, the other thing, Simon, if I may, is the issue of education is going to be crucial.
Yes.
Absolutely crucial. Sometimes, I'm invited to go and speak in universities from time to time, I ask people, I ask the guys in the audience what they want to do. And sometimes they say, well, I really want to work in the film and television industry. And then I say, come on, be honest. How many of you out there have illegally downloaded Life of Pi, which is one of our films, right? And then I wait for a couple of minutes, and then a hand goes up, and then another hand goes up. And then I point out the disconnection between saying, I want to work in that industry, and then actually depriving that industry of revenues. That's the direction that education has to take.
Yeah, this is also in the educational field. We have also the project. We started to educate the school children from the primary school. And we have developed the fairy tales about the different objects of intellectual property, including the copyright. And we have printed these books, disseminated as reading materials for the grades 3 to 6 from the primary school. And also we are holding each year on the 26th of April, which is the World Intellectual Property Day, in all over Georgia, in the schools, the special lessons concerning, for example, last year it was the copyright, this year it was the innovation, improving life was the slogan of the year, and this is very, very good. The children are so very involved in this process, and they like to read the stories, to discuss the stories, and also the scenario is very interesting. The country is intellectiana, like intellectual property, and the people who are enforcing the right, copito and patito, and there is also the land called piratiana, like the piracy, and and when you tell them that, are they right, so are these people good, and you have to show the children what's the bad and what's good from the very childhood, yes, and so this is the education, of course, is very, very important thing.
I think there is a sense sometimes that, it doesn't really matter if we download this stuff. I mean, these are all big bastards, they're all rich Hollywood companies. Time Warner, Warner Brothers can afford it. By the way, is King Arthur has that King Arthur been released in Poland? Anyway, King Arthur, latest Warner Brothers film, is going to lose $100 million, right? So don't worry about Warner Brothers. But people think that it's the big people that get hurt, but it's not. It's small creative producers. I don't know whether anybody saw one of our films called Carol, came out 2 years ago, was nominated for an Oscar. We didn't win, unfortunately. It's based on a Patricia Highsmith story. Carol took 14 years to bring to the cinema. And one small firm of producers didn't earn anything for 3 years until it hit this. These are the people that get hit by leakages of intellect, by piracy. So that also is a part of the education challenge, I think.
In your presentation, you referred to the problem of free.
Yes.
And this is the pessimistic line, which, again, we can do a lot of education, but the digital world has created the Google and YouTube world where you can go in and everything's there and it's free. So the technology has created the problem, but is there ways the technology can perhaps create the solution as well?
Well, as I think I indicated, I think there are some indications, particularly in music. I mean, the discussions are most advanced in music, whereby blockchain technology may hold. This is the idea of digital tagging of bits of content. But we're 5-10 years probably away from. Well, no, I mean, the technology is already there, but turning it commercially into something which works. So it may be that technology also has the solution here. Remind me of the second part of the question again.
It was to do with the problem of free.
Yes, okay. I think it's a problem that psychologically, so many people now think that they can get stuff for free. I talked about the YouTube world, you know. And being a kind of 17th century French music nut, you know, if I want to go and find some music by Jean-Baptiste Lully or Marc-Antoine Charpentier, I can go onto YouTube. It's there everywhere, and I can get it for nothing. Actually, I would be prepared to pay for it, but I don't get the opportunity to pay for it through Google, YouTube, you know. So there are actually people around there who would pay for proper value for these products, which are not, who are not given the opportunity to do so. And the problem with that, and the problem for investors is, you know, if a company comes to us and says, you know, we're a digital distribution business and we've got all this music, you know, classical, modern, we do all this theater. Will you give us £5 million to invest in our business? We have to ask them, well, how are you going to compete with this free product? That's what the problem, that's why free is a problem. How do you create a legal, financially robust business which returns an income to investors when there's all this free stuff out there? That's the challenge for the next 5 or 10 years. And Simon, if I may look into the looking glass a little, I think we're not far away from an equivalent of what I call the Standard Oil moment. You know, when in 1910, the US government decided that Standard Oil was too big and had to be broken up. And I think we may get to that point with Google and Facebook, because at the moment they are beginning now to be so big and so powerful and so able to impose their business models on other people that it will inhibit the growth of small businesses and proper competition.
Fascinating.
Yeah, but on the other side, also the development of digital technology also creates the staff and the program which is fighting against this online piracy. For example, I was last year in Korea, in South Korea, and they have created some, they call it some DNA, the program which can find the stuff which is illegal in internet. So, and these new technologies on the other side also can support the avoiding of the illegal content in the internet also. Yeah. And so I was really, when I saw how it works, how they created it, so there's the program which finds the web pages which are illegal, or either they make the extract, DNA extract from the films, and they can find that this film is illegally posted on that website. So, and of course, on the one hand, the digitalization of everything makes the problem from the customers and from the creators, but on the other hand, it can support their job and the job of the CMOs and the other associations.
Well, one last question for Martin, and then we'll wrap. In this really scary world we've just sketched out, where holding on and controlling your intellectual property, and by extension being able to make some return on your investment is really hard to do. How on earth do you ever finance any independent films?
Oh, that's a very good question. And we are in the hits and misses business. This always has to be said. I mean, that's the bigger problem for us, that you know, it's great if you have a successful investment. I mean, it was brilliant that we invested in Avatar, because that pays for a lot of failures. And we've had a lot of failures. And the problem in investing in this sector is the hits have to pay for the failures.
Of course.
Otherwise, we go out of business.
It's always been like that.
Absolutely. And the answer to your question, Simon, is, and I'm afraid there are no shortcuts to this, you have to have deep industry experience of knowing how to do it. And if I may, just refer to that very interesting presentation which the gentleman from the ministry gave just before lunch when he was talking about access to finance and he was talking about the banks and so on. One of the problems with, it's part of the Creative Europe program. Creative Europe, the new Strand 3, loan finance, loan guarantee finance, all that stuff. One of the problems with that policy conceptually is they think that you can take a banker for 6 months or 12 months, bit of training, and then they'll know how to invest in the creative sector. It doesn't work like that, I'm sorry to say. You know, you need to have worked in this sector, in film, or television, or games, or marketing services, or music, or whatever it is, or preferably all of those areas, to understand all of those business models. Then you're in a position to begin to assess the risk, because as I tried to say, you know, success in this area, creative business financing investment, success is all down to your ability to mitigate investor risk in various ways. And you mitigate risk by choosing your partners well, by the use of tax incentives, by all sorts of mechanisms. But it's about managing your risk, and it's about knowledge and deep industry experience. And Simon, I've only been doing it for about 10 years, you know. And the first 2 years, the boss wouldn't let me out, okay? He said, you don't know enough yet, okay? So you have to start, you have to go in at the bottom, learn about the industry, learn about the sector. Then the nose will begin to tell you what commercial decisions are right and what are wrong.
And you get more hits and fewer misses.
Yeah, absolutely. One hopes so, yes.
And so the portfolio kind of balances out over time.
Well, it is the portfolio.
Oh, yes.
It is the portfolio, yeah.
Okay, it says end of time. We got there, I think. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Sophio, thank you very much, Martin. We're done.